Hi there. In this week's chat with Ralph, the legendary ex-City equity research analyst, we are going to talk about three things. We'll start off with the depressing stuff first, and then work up towards ending on a high. So today we are going to talk about number one, the weather, um, and specifically El Nino. Secondly, we shall be talking about alphabet soup. So specifically there, how the UK can do okay with AI between the US and the EU. Then the third thing is that we will talk about the Apple Vision Pro. So with those things in mind, I mean, I'd like to talk about El Nino. I mean, it's one of those things that I guess people just don't really think that much about. But it is going to have a very big effect. Um, a bit like inflation maybe a year and a half ago. So anyway, would you care to enlighten everyone about your thoughts about El Nino, what it is, and what the effects are going to be?
Yes, I mean, the first thing I think we need to point out is that El Nino is a weather phenomenon
Yep.
because you were saying let's talk about the weather, and that is what we are basically talking about. There is also La Nina, which
Yes.
is sort of the opposite effect. And the reason I know anything about this at all is because I used to be an insurance analyst.
Yes.
So this is normally the conversation stopper. The conversation stoppers go like this: German accent, insurance.
Yes.
You can basically make sure that nobody is listening to this after.
Everyone listens to you though, Ralph, because you have that aura. So you
Oh,
have an aura.
the
Yeah,
aura.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
Using that aura, I'm going to talk to the last few remaining people on the show about El Nino. So El Nino is not La Nina. La
Hmm.
Nina is when basically things get colder,
Yeah.
let's say, and El Nino is when things get warmer. Well, what it actually means is that it relates to water temperature and the Gulf Stream and other
Yeah.
uh, the stream dynamics in the oceans. And I mean, I really am not much of an expert on this. I just know El Nino because it used to be a regular phenomenon which we had to be aware of because
Hmm.
it would mean that claims in the insurance industry would go up.
Hmm.
And so uh, it broadly is when the uh, ocean water, which is transported around the Earth by various dynamics, is broadly getting warmer.
Yeah.
And the impacts of these are in the US broadly as follows. Uh, the north of North America, if that still makes sense, which is sort of Canada and north of Canada, is getting warmer.
Hmm.
The all of the south of the United States, so the southeast and the southwest and the middle, is getting wetter, so it
Hmm.
rains more. And the bit of the USA which is sort of the eastern seaboard, the east, um, is getting warmer. Now that leads to more drought.
Hmm.
And this is the sort of the part of America I haven't explicitly mentioned, but interestingly, it leads to drought in the sort of agricultural baskets of the US, which is
Yeah.
that central basin. I mean, if you think about the US as basically a big U-shaped, and
Hmm.
then it sort of slopes off again to the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of U-shape, the U basin, where, of course, we have Iowa and various bread baskets and agricultural sources
Hmm.
the world is benefiting from. Now, the issue is, of course, that if we get more frequent and more severe droughts in that area, then the crops are in danger.
Hmm.
We get less crops, the harvest is less efficient, there's less
Yeah.
of it, and therefore food prices are increasing.
Hmm.
And that is a dynamic which we have always regularly seen as one which is associated with this weather phenomenon called El Nino.
Hmm.
Now, El Niños come about periodically. They can last up to 4 years, although I
Mm,
believe that's rare. I think
mhm,
normally they last between 1 and 2 years. And it has now been confirmed that all the indications are indeed that we are heading into an El Nino phase.
mhm.
We're not quite in it yet, but it's expected to start later this year in sort of August or so.
Right.
And one last impact, which is counterintuitive, which is that wildfires, the wildfire season, which now
Mhm,
tragically, unfortunately, we have to speak of
mhm.
in California, is not going to be as pronounced. So there's going to be less wildfires, there's going to be less hurricanes, but there's going to be more drought. I think that's
Right.
broadly correct to
Mm,
characterize it that way.
mm. And that, I mean, that obviously has an impact on agricultural produce and those kinds of foodstuff commodities, doesn't it?
That's the issue precisely. I mean, the reason that I suppose we are talking about this now in our weekly chat is not just that we are interested in talking about the weather. Uh, it,
Interesting
it,
though that is.
it,
Let's face it.
it's fascinating and riveting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, I
Yeah.
talk about very little else
Yes, of
when
course.
I'm off the podcast, but
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but, but the sentence continues.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because it does have economic impacts, and
Mm,
and we mentioned what it is. So crop prices, agricultural food prices, grocery prices, etc., are going up, and that is not good in itself. But it is, of course, especially unwanted at the
mm,
current time when the other thing we talk about a lot is inflation.
mm,
And inflation is, of course, going well. I mean, probably the two elements which are driving inflation most are energy prices and food prices.
mhm,
And energy prices are now thankfully coming down, so we're going to get a stay of execution there, so to speak.
mm,
But we're all waiting for inflation numbers to come down. And we commented last week on the fact that I believe economists and everybody is watching inflation, the metric inflation, with a lot more focus than they otherwise would. So we're
mm,
all waiting for inflation to come down. But the fact that we are moving into this El Nino phase for the next 1 to 2 years is surely going to mean that an important component of inflation, which is gross food prices, is unlikely to come down materially.
mm,
Perhaps I'm being too pessimistic. We will have to see how this actually then pans out in detail and in
mm,
reality. But sitting here at the start of another El Nino phase at the time of biting inflation, which we currently, of course, are in, I'm sort of minded to see this as a negative event.
mm, mm. Yeah, it's not good, is it? It's not good. But I guess we'll just have to see, whether the predictions are correct and that it comes when it's supposed to come, or whether it gets delayed or something. I don't know. But yeah, like you say, I mean, the problem is it's coming at precisely the wrong time, isn't it? Really.
Yes, and unfortunately, I've gone through there is a flow chart which allows you to sort of evaluate whether the various meteorological metrics which are in focus when you try to assess whether an El
Mm,
Nino event is impending or not. All these various metrics point towards the El Nino event happening
mm,
because sometimes it's a complicated flow chart, and often you come down and they say, well, El Nino likely or not likely or may not happen or whatever, but
mm,
this time, unfortunately, it says El Nino very likely to happen.
mm. So yes, I mean, I wonder whether we'll see, stocking up, people, buying stuff in again. Is it going to be? I wonder if it'll be like the beginning of the no. So yeah.
Well, I don't think so because the foodstuffs we're talking about are perishable, aren't they? I
Mm,
mean, you can't really panic buy tomatoes.
mm. Well, I mean, I suppose anything that you can freeze, I guess you could
Oh,
potentially,
fair
do
enough.
that. Because I remember it was
Okay,
funny, isn't it? It does seem like a long time ago now, but I do remember that electrical retailers at the beginning of the pandemic were selling out of those chest freezers, weren't they?
right,
So that
yeah.
people were just buying loads of meat and veg and stuff and just shoving it in there, whilst obviously buying pasta in vast quantities and, of course, loads of loo roll. But yeah, that all seems like a long time ago now, but it wasn't actually that long ago. But
Well,
anyway,
one prediction I'm happy to make with confidence. I do not believe that El Nino is going to affect the price of loo
no,
roll.
no,
Actually,
no.
quite the opposite, because people have less food to eat.
Okay, that's good.
Shall we
That's good.
move on?
Yeah, let's move on that note. Let's just yes, let's wipe that from our memory, shall we?
Oh my
Uh,
toast, yeah.
I was desperately trying to think of some kind of loo roll related pun there. But anyway, yes. So okay, let's talk about the next thing about AI, the UK, the US, and the EU. So basically, what has happened is Sunak, Prime Minister Sunak has decided that he wants Britain's play a leading role in the development of AI and AI regulation. Now, he got endorsed essentially by Biden. He's been in America for the last few days. Biden sees it as a good kind of option. So I think that there's going to be some sort of AI regulation conference here in the autumn. And at the moment, as things stand, you've probably got the US at one extreme, which wants regulation, but not too much because it's their companies that are the ones that are going to be the most affected. Then you've got the Europeans at the other end of the scale who are very keen to be very strict on the development. And then you've got the Brits in the middle who are, wanting more regulation in the US, but not getting as hysterical as the Europeans, for instance. Now, before we go on, I would say, I mean, I got this. It just seemed to me when we were talking earlier on, because I know that I hope this doesn't burst the bubble, but we do have a chat before we get on here, so just but it seems to me, and I've written down a few things here about how I think that Rishi Sunak has um, seemed he's jumped from one bandwagon to another. It seems because I kind of feel that he comes in on a Monday morning and says to has a meeting, goes, right team, what's hot right now, and someone will come up with some word or a few words, and then everyone has like a session, throwing everything in. So far I remember him wanting to do NFTs, so doing I think also doing a Brit coin as well, talking about that, and that didn't really pan out. He wanted us to be at the cutting edge of battery technology. That didn't really work out either. He wanted us to be at the cutting edge of chips. Didn't work too well. Nexperia in the was it Newport wafer fab thing in Wales didn't go very well. Then there was whole ARM, which was he wanted desperately to list in London, but decided to go to New York anyway. So we didn't do very well in chips. And of course, there was SPACs as well, which everyone else and their dog did. Made a ton of money, and then just as things were really winding down, that's when we changed the regulations to make SPACs easier to do over here. So it seems that he's been kind of one step or a few steps behind the latest trends, but this particular one seems to have gained traction. And I kind of, again, wonder whether this is a case of uh, is he trying to find something to distract everyone with so that people won't focus too much on how underwhelming the whole Brexit process has been. I'm trying to say this politely. So on the one hand, I'm wondering whether he's potentially going into the election next year, saying, okay, You voted for Brexit. We brought it to life. Okay, people, didn't do particularly well. And yes, it is a bit of a pain, but we're at the cutting edge of AI. So it's almost like he wants to bring something positive to the party.
Mm.
But anyway, what do you make of it?
Well, yes. I mean, as we were talking earlier,
Hmm.
we were having a little linguistic discussion about the metaphor jumping on a bandwagon.
Hmm.
And I was yes, first of all, the metaphor is accurate, but I was wondering whether the metaphor is sort of like you need to first of all identify the bandwagon and then jump
Mm.
on it. And so
Yeah,
the meetings are probably a bit like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So what's
Any
hot? What?
bandwagons? Anyone?
Yeah,
Anyone?
exactly.
Anyone? Bandwagons? Yeah,
So yeah, there's this cool one about crypto. Oh
yeah,
yeah, fantastic. Bitcoin, is it?
yeah,
We could call it Britcoin.
yeah,
Oh wow, let's
yeah.
do
You
that.
can imagine. You can imagine.
The
Yeah.
sort of conversations of that nature. And well, the joking aside, Brexit has of course created an issue. I mean, nobody will know this because I'm always so neutral on Brexit, but I don't actually like it much.
Yeah.
That's a complete surprise to everybody, but
Mm.
there it is.
Well, I
And
tell you, I'm just glad I was sitting down. I mean, otherwise I would have had a bit of a wobble there. But yeah.
yeah, there we are. But anyway, so we lost some stuff in Brexit.
Hmm.
Let's call it that, and we gained something. What did we gain? We gained one thing, which I believe is not a matter of opinion, and that is that we are no longer part of EU regulation. That is true in most parts. In the financial services sector, it's not as clear cut, but certainly new regulation, which the EU countries are bringing in, which is going to be binding for them, is no longer binding for us.
Hmm.
And that is an asset if we can bring industries here um, who will be able to benefit from lighter touch or light touch regulation in that particular field.
Hmm.
Now, as you mentioned, there were a few bandwagons which we identified, which we unfortunately had to leave rushing by because
Hmm.
we couldn't quite jump on them. But I think, is something which we might be able to catch early. If
Hmm.
early is still the right word in this, by the way, I think, because we have been discussing AI and the technological advancement often on this program,
Hmm.
and it is clearly the case that the technological development is now in a steeper part of the exponential progression curve.
Hmm.
But the investment part, I think, is not quite there yet because
Hmm.
the investable commercial representations of AI have not emerged as much yet. There are some, but they are the enabling ones. Chips, for
Hmm.
example, Nvidia has
Hmm.
the stock price has soared by 60%.
Hmm.
So that is true. It is also true that, let's say, make Nvidia the bellwether of this. We can see that when there are commercial applications of AI already, that is where the investments are going,
Hmm.
because AI will be an explosive force in the future. But there are lots of commercial applications which as yet have to develop, and that is where the money will go.
Hmm.
So it is a smart move and an understandable move to position the UK as the host country of industries which are to be developed, which are to develop in the AI space.
Hmm.
Bring in the other issue, which is regulation, which we've also discussed on this program, and which is clearly uh, becoming a very tangible issue. 2, 3 weeks ago, we said that when people who lobby politicians, tech people who lobby politicians, are coming back from their discussions and they're saying things like, "Ooh, unfortunately, this is all very difficult and the politicians are not listening." It's not just they're not listening, they're not really even understanding
Hmm.
that this is a problem that needs to be regulated. I think we are getting past this stage now. I think politicians are now listening.
Hmm.
Politicians have discovered that this is an issue which has to be regulated. Now, the European Union has reacted in a firm way and passed an AI law. That's not how the EU works, but let's call it that. It's easier
Hmm.
to think about it in these terms. Um, the UK is outside, the AI law doesn't apply, so we can still have industries here that are
Mm.
going to develop their product in a lighter touch regulation.
Mm.
And I think that is the asset which Sunak and the Tory government tries to position as lucrative, as attractive to the AI world.
Mm.
At the same time, Sunak, I think, is also going to try to position the UK as a sort of neutral ground
Mm.
where AI related policies or discussions which might lead to policy are taking place.
Hmm.
And that is why I think um, he's recently announced that there is going to be this AI regulation conference here in the
Yeah.
UK, and so it's going to be an interesting development, an interesting space to watch. One comment which I'd like to make is we sort of need to be careful what we exactly want to position the UK as. Is it
Mm.
going to be a neutral ground where we're going to host UK regulation conferences and such like? Well, if we are going to become the country where this is increasingly going to happen, then it stands to reason that we also have to have some regulation. We can't really talk about regulation and then not have it.
Mm.
But there is clearly the chance here to regulate a response. Sorry, to create a responsibly regulated environment for AI technology.
Mm.
And I think this is sorely needed because the tech world, well, it hasn't left the UK, but the London Stock Exchange has not proven itself to be the premier location for tech
Mm.
companies to IPO recently, and that
Mm.
is clearly to the detriment of the UK. So if this
Mm.
can be done, then I think it's a positive development.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot to cover. I think that the fact that they're going to be having this thing going on in the autumn gives them a bit of thinking time. However, I do think they need to come up with something very quickly. That it's not going to be one of these long drawn out things. I don't think. I mean, it's going to be ongoing because things will change all the time. But I really think that, for instance, I know this sounds terrible, but if it was a conference on climate change or something like that, there's a lot of scope when you're talking about that sort of thing to say, kick stuff into the long grass. Still go, well, of course we can't do this because of this, that, and the other. But with AI, it has to be done quickly
Mhm.
and universally. So I have hopes if it does actually go ahead and all the main people, the right people are there, then hopefully something good should come out of it. But
Yeah.
obviously we'll need to see. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the new Apple headset, which, I mean, unless you've been living in a cave at some point this week, in which case, well, how is the cave? It's probably quite good at the moment because probably quite nice and cool in there. But
It's
but
cool, and I have a
yeah,
3D cave,
you have a 3D cave.
well, like
Excellent,
like a metaverse cave.
excellent,
It's
excellent.
it's really nice. Yeah,
Good.
it's a man
A
cave.
meta man cave. No,
A man cave, yeah.
that sounds like something else. A meta man cave, doesn't it? But anyway,
And it's
uh,
it's time again to move
yeah,
on, I
it's
think. Yeah.
time to move on. Right. So yeah, looks really impressive. Everyone says it's sort of thinner, lighter,
Hmm.
more comfortable than other iterations of these things. I must say, when I first saw them, I thought that you could look through them,
Yeah.
which is like the Oculus ones. They're all solid, so you can definitely see that no one can see out of them. These ones quite funky because it looks like you can look through them, but actually what it is, it's a whole load of cameras on the inside, and they're projecting the image of your eyes as they're moving onto the outside, which is a bit freaky. But I guess I don't know. It looks like someone you can see that someone's in there. That's the thing. I think that's yeah. I know that sounds a bit strange to say, but anyway. So I think that it looks good. I mean, from what I've seen, I think it could potentially replace the laptop and screens. Lots of screens. Because you're in there, you can have these massive screens. Apparently, you just look at something, and because there are so many cameras looking at your eyes, it knows exactly where you're looking, and then you pinch in, and you can double click using all these gestures and things, and apparently it's incredibly intuitive. So yeah, I mean it sounds really good. I mean, my first impression is, wow, this is very cool. But then I do think it's the sort of thing that if you got one, you'd go, yeah, this is great. Unboxing, great. Oh yeah, isn't it so cool? You put it on, and then you think, yeah, but what am I going to use it for? That's the slight problem. But anyway, what are your impressions?
Yes, I have a friend, and he
You do
um,
good. I'm glad to
yeah,
hear it. Yeah.
I've got one friend.
Hey, you can always count on me. You can always count on me. So yeah,
That does
you got a
remind me of
friend in me. Sorry.
of a sort of anecdote which I briefly relate. I mean,
Yeah.
when I interviewed for one of the companies in the city I worked for, people in an interview. There's lots of people in the interview, lots of traders and senior partners and all sorts of people, and one of them asked me, "Well, if your friends were here, Ralph, what would they say about you?" And it was sort of the version of what are your strengths and
Yes,
weaknesses, and he
exactly. Yeah.
didn't quite want to get there.
Mhm.
And I found that strange, and I sort of said, well, exactly what are you talking about? Is it the strength and weaknesses question? It's yeah, well, it's about your friends. And I said,
Yeah.
well, you will have seen my CV. I'm German. I haven't got any friends.
Oh my god!
And
I can't
everybody,
imagine you saying that. I have to
it
say.
was brilliant. Everybody started laughing. I mean, it erupted in laughing, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that's how I got the job.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
in the meantime, I have found one friend,
Yes.
and that person.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yes,
Congratulations. Yeah.
he is as yet the relationship is going very strong. He's
Excellent.
very
I'm glad
happy
to hear
with
it.
how I act towards him. So
Good.
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 He lent me his Oculus, whatever it is, and this is the yeah, this is the older one. This is the blocked off one,
Hmm.
and I played around with this, and to your point, I mean, there was this thing where you could sort of dance on stage with people
Hmm.
in your 3D virtual world,
Hmm.
and I was loving it. I was like
Mm.
dancing, and I was
Yeah.
thinking, yeah, and then I was looking to the right, and there was a person
Yeah.
dancing. Oh, yeah, that's also fantastic.
Excellent. Yeah. You
And
got
then I
some
was
moves, Ralph.
like,
Yeah.
then I was like, well, sort of getting a bit samey. This is like, I don't know, what am I gonna do now? Everybody was dancing all the bloody time. Sorry,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and so eventually I just sat down and thought, what am I gonna do now? And
Yeah.
so I tested out some other applications, and eventually it just got old. And eventually
Mm.
means like after 2 or 3 days.
Mm.
So this particular product, first of all, it seems to be lighter.
Mm.
The fact that your eyes are being projected to the front of
Mm.
the goggle is actually an interesting point if you think about it, because it serves no purpose. You yourself, unless I'm mistaken, cannot see out.
Mm. Well, you can because of the cameras. So there's cameras all around the outside, and there's cameras all around the inside. All the cameras on the inside are so many sensors and things are looking at trying to pick up where you're looking, but then the cameras on the outside are looking at what you would be looking at. So for all intents and purposes, it is like it is
Yeah, I
clear
see.
because you're seeing it in real time. And if someone were to walk across in front of you, you would see them. So
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't appreciate that particular product
Mm,
feature, but so that does make it indeed like what we've been waiting for, the virtual
mhm,
reality overlay. That's
mm,
an overlay over reality. So if
yeah.
I and so this is even cooler than I thought. Now my point is what I'm getting at is that the uh, device which I was testing from my mate got old a little bit because the applications were limited of it. It was
Mm,
just basically glorified video game
mhm,
device. Cool enough, but not that interesting in the end. This particular product adds to that another important feature, excuse me, and that is that you can use it for work purposes.
mm,
So you have various screens, as many, well, maybe not as many as you want, but well, I mean, I suppose they're not limited,
mm,
and they can be as big as you want them to be.
yeah.
I don't know exactly. Again, I'm looking forward to actually trying that out, that device. I
Mm,
don't know exactly how it works with your interaction, how the keyboards work, and what the keyboard is,
mhm,
if it's virtual or whether you can actually rig it up to a normal keyboard.
mm,
One would think that has to be possible.
mhm,
And then, of course, you're beginning to see that you're creating a virtual workspace which you can actually use. And then it
mm,
becomes a lot more flexible because you don't have to have a screen on your table anymore, on your desk at
mm,
home.
mm,
It becomes a device which is light and simple to use, which saves space at home, which
mhm,
makes the home, to the extent that that is your workspace, more do- domestic again because you
mm,
haven't got the appliances all over the place.
mhm,
And of course, also, if you're in public, the fact that your eyes are projected,
mm,
as you say, it is a bit creepy, but it does also mean that you are still interacting with your outside world.
exactly.
You're not locked away.
Mm,
Um, and perhaps you'll be sitting on the tube and you can read your book on your Kindle in this way. I think this is also something which Apple wishes the device to be able to
mhm,
do. And so to me, I'm actually excited about it. To me, that's sort of one step towards the usability case for
mm,
the metaverse,
mhm,
which I'm looking for, and
mm,
which we have frequently discussed on the podcast as
mm,
well. I'm not really looking to immerse myself into a fictional world. I'm looking to use the metaverse as the metaverse, the virtual reality as a platform, as an interface, which allows me to more easily and more holistically manipulate devices.
mm. Yeah. I mean, it is. I just think it's absolutely fascinating. But I do think you hit the nail on the head when you said about how it's really all about the applications. Basically, the developers need to be convinced that this is something that will catch on
Mhm.
enough that they will then spend the time and the money to develop applications that make this thing something that people really want.
Yeah.
Because to sort of go, hey everyone, this means you can have the biggest screen you've ever had.
Yeah.
It's not quite the thing that is going to make you go, actually, do you know what? I was wondering what I did have I have got $3,499 burning a hole in my pocket. Maybe I'll buy it. You're not going to deal on the back of you can get a bigger screen. But I mean, I did actually. I said this sort of earlier in the week in one of the daily podcasts that I think that this could be if the price at some point, because obviously it's very expensive now. Only a few people are going to. It's going to be rich people, early adopters, and massive geeks, basically.
Mhm.
Um, oh, and sorry, and obviously developers and things. Um, but I think if it comes down to 2,500 or $2,000, but it replaces your laptop, then
Mm.
suddenly that becomes more compelling because then you're thinking, well, it's not just a peripheral toy. This is something that I can actually use. I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that their laptops are so expensive actually may prove to be quite useful in this case, because
Hmm.
if people then replace, their new laptop with these, the headsets, then it's the gap between how much it costs now and how much it needs to cost
Yeah.
is actually a lot narrower. So yeah.
Indeed so. I mean, another way to think about it in which this could develop is if it replaces your mobile,
Mm,
which I think Apple has mentioned as a possibility.
mm,
Then, well, if you think about it, an iPhone costs like 1,000 quid or something,
mm,
but you never really pay for it. I mean,
no.
I mean you do, but it's rolled into the contract
Mm-hmm,
which you have with Vodafone or
mm,
O2 or wherever your provider is. And then at the end of the 2-year contract, you've basically paid for the hardware, and then you are free to upgrade or not.
mm,
I have chosen not to, so I now own my phone,
mm,
but I've sort of paid for it in installments through the contract with my
mm,
provider.
mm,
And so this could be done in exactly the same way. Currently, the cost appears to be punitive, but it's early days and the
mm,
cost will come down. And so your price point is interesting. And once it comes down to 1,000 quid, maybe 2,000, who knows, it could be rolled into a contract with your phone provider if indeed it does
mm.
offer
That's
the
interesting. I didn't think of that.
additional
Yeah.
utility of
Mm,
making a phone call.
mm,
And why wouldn't it? I mean, all you
mm,
need for that is a little microphone.
mm. Yes, that is very interesting. And I was just thinking then, I mean, if you're having goggles that go around there, I now I don't know this, but as in what is the sound like, but you can conduct, um, so you don't, to listen to music, you don't have to have something in or on your ears, do you? Is it like a bone conduction thing or whatever?
Well, you
I've
can have
never.
that, but of course, excuse me, my voice appears to be going today.
Mm,
Um, but if you think about what you're doing now with AirPods, for
mm,
example, Apple AirPods, they just click into
mm,
your ear, and your mobile is not necessarily even anywhere inside. You carry it
mm,
in your
mm,
jeans pocket or wherever. And then, excuse me, and then you can, of course, also take phone calls and
mm,
talk, and it's not a problem. So the AirPods are a microphone and an
mm.
earphone at the same time.
Well, I'm just thinking of, if you've got something here
Yeah,
and then, like over your eyes and then it's wrapping around your head. I'm just kind of thinking, well, if that's the case, the bit that sort of goes round the side of your head could mean that you somehow have some bone conduction thing going on. So you don't have to have something in your ears, which is safety, would be a safety feature. Potential, like they could say that, look, you can walk along the street and it's okay because you can still hear stuff, you can still see it,
yeah.
but you can also happen to listen to music as well via bone conduct. Now, like I said, I've never listened to
Yeah, I
music like that.
don't know whether that works, whether you can actually listen via bone conduction. I don't know. You
I
can
believe so.
speak.
Well, because I back in the day when I used to do load of triathlon and stuff, and even then there were goggles there were things you could get that while you're swimming you can actually hear music and it's not
Really?
with something in your ear.
That's cool.
And those things, they are obviously a lot better these days. But
Hmm.
I've never actually listened to them myself because I did buy some. I couldn't work out how to use them. I tried desperately trying to use. It was more a case of I couldn't download anything, and I just gave up in the end. But yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? But I think very exciting. It's obviously too expensive at the moment, but it's really going to develop on, yes, price, but it's going to be much more on the apps.
Yes, and
People
then,
are going to have to see that they need to get this in their life.
but if you think about a situation where it might indeed replace your laptop or your iPad,
Mm.
in a usable way, then what you have is another step towards a multi-platform product,
Mm.
where then it's basically the everything product.
Yeah.
Think about what we're doing on our mobiles. We basically
Mm.
do everything on our mobiles,
Mm.
with the exception perhaps of, well, no perhaps about it, with the exception of actually doing work which I can only do at the PC,
Mm.
doing spreadsheets, doing financial models, doing this and the other, writing books or whatever people
Mm.
wish to do. That I wouldn't do on my mobile.
Mm.
But if there is an application which allows me to do this, that would be fantastic.
Mm.
The only misgiving I have with that is I don't really want to walk around all day with skiing goggles
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's
on
the
my
next
head.
thing. Yes, because in a way they have to make you want to keep them on for longer so that you will use it more. But on the other hand, you then have to think about the comfort as well and the
Yeah.
practicality of wearing something that is currently a bit heavy. I mean, it's probably not heavy initially, but after a while. Plus, what does it do to your eyes as well? You know, prolonged exposure to that with something so close to your, to your eyes anyway. What does that have a detrimental effect or not, or what? I don't know.
Well, again, that's why I actually said initially it's one step forward to what I would like to see. I mean,
Mm.
ideally, I would just like to see like normal glasses with
Mm.
some sort of additional clip-on contraption.
Like
I,
Google
I,
Glass.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Google Glasses which work actually.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not a tech person, so I don't know whether the immersiveness can be generated by normal glasses. But
That's the
then,
thing, isn't it?
yeah, but
Because
then
I sort
again,
of wonder that.
everything is solvable. But so if
Mm.
you remember the sort of old, there used to be something in the 80s which you could put on your sunglasses, sort of wind breaking
Oh, I know what you mean
sort
on the
of
side. Yeah.
leather things, which I
Yeah.
sometimes used when I was skiing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
didn't really quite work, but if you can do that, maybe you can do that
Yeah.
also
Because actually, I
for.
was thinking, when we were talking earlier about the the fact that you can't look through the goggles, I imagine that that is probably because if you could look through the goggles, the contrast that you would get with stuff that's projected on in front of your eyes is probably not going to be as clear as it would be
Mhm.
unless it was projected onto a like a black surface, I imagine. So maybe that's what it is, and maybe that's the whole thing with the because I suppose with if it was projected onto something that really was transparent, it would be a bit more like when you're driving a car with head-up display. So it's like
I was
lights.
just going to
Is
say
this,
that,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. There used to be a car in the 80s or so which had that as an innovation for the first time. And I thought it was terribly distracting. It was
Mm.
weird. I mean,
Mm.
because you had to sort of focus your eyes from the middle distance of driving to the windscreen where the thing was
Mm.
projected on,
Mm.
and well, I don't know. I didn't like it. It was odd.
I've had it in in a previous car, and I actually found it very useful. Like
Hmm.
it would project stuff on like your directions. You got the sat nav on. It will project like this is where you need to go off, and so you
Okay,
don't have to take your eyes off the road. It can be very good. It can be very good. But anyway, but there you go. Exciting things for the
totally.
future.
Yeah.
Bit expensive, but could be fun, and also 2 hour battery life, so not that great. Um, but although
So you
you
need
can,
to carry a backpack on
although
you
you can,
in a
you
rucksack.
can plug it. Yeah, you can plug it in. You can plug it in. So, um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, these things always get better. So anyway, exciting stuff. It's not perfect, but there are a lot of possibilities. But
Hmm.
anyway, I think on that score, we might as well call it a day here.
Hmm.
So thank you very much, as always, for your
Thank you.
inputs and exciting thoughts, etc. And
And
yeah,
for my dance moves this
and for
time.
your dancers,
Yeah.
obviously, yeah. But anyway, thank you very much indeed, and we'll be back again with more next week.
Okay,
Many
cool.
thanks.
Thanks for listening,
Bye.
guys. Thank you.
Bye.